Hello, everybody. Transport in the time of COVID-19 update 3rd of November. 7+ months since the first lockdown, second one about to start. Okay, email me for links and slides, although they do go up there. And I look forward to communications which people have been sending me. If they are sent on the Tuesday, sometimes I won't get them, but they are all looked at. Okay, so the theme today is EATF2, what now? And I'll come on to that after a bit. Not very much on infrastructure that's gone in today. A lot of new pieces to read and consultations, and a bit on developments in the last week in UK and London, and the usual rolling slides. Okay, so going into lockdown, that's the official government guidance. The new lockdown rules, if you go to the bottom one there, outdoor recreation encouraged. You can meet one person outside your household. You can exercise, that means walking and cycling outdoors with the people with your support bubble or with one other person from another household. And they talk about how you shouldn't travel outside your local area, but I'm not quite sure how big the local area is when you want to go for a bike ride. Right, now here's a nice graphic from someone called Jack Fifield, annual motor traffic in London. And this returns to something which we've been talking about. There was, after TfL came in about there, bit of a decline. Then 2009, in comes the new GPS systems, route guidance systems, and it's gone bonkers up to here. And that is the cause of congestion. And that is your graphic to go to when people say all the congestion is being caused by bike lanes and whatever, low traffic neighborhoods. No, it hasn't. Extra motor traffic, because motorists have found ways to get around, primarily on side streets. Now, here is your Janet Sadiq Khan quote for the day. The smart mobility innovation during the recovery won't be ride apps, hoverboards, or flying cars. It'll be building us a city where you don't need to drive in the first place. Yes. That's Janet Sadiq Khan, who you should know about, street wars and so on. Right, here's from the Daily Hate Mail. Furious record 2.3 million penalties are dished out. 6,300 motorists snared in speed traps every day. Okay, so let's just have a look at that. That's about 121,000 vehicle miles driven per speeding penalty, which means you have to drive for about 10,000 miles a year at most. That means you'll be driving for about 12 years before you get a speeding penalty. And since speeding, depending on the kind of road you're on, is lying at about 30 to 60% of all motorists on a regular basis, what you should draw from that is that there aren't enough motorists being caught. And look at the kind of words they're talking about: fury, who is furious, how about people who are furious at all the speeding vehicles, snared, you know, the idea that the motorists are kind of innocent victims, animals, innocent little furry animals who are snared by the horrible traffic speed cameras. Cash cows, no, the money doesn't go into some bottomless pit, and motorists should pay more, some of us think. Here's a nice thread from Dr. Caroline Brown. Yesterday I had an email from some people saying, council are doing stuff on cycling without consulting the community. And this is her reply. We got to do something about climate change. Residents weren't consulted about giving over so much parking for space and for cars in their streets. They were not consulted about providing ongoing public subsidy, which it is, for a form of transport that kills people every day. And let's get on with it. So there's a nice little thread there. Okay, we held the second of our 2 webinars, replacing our original April conference. That's us Road Danger Reduction Forum with Road Peace. I reported back on the first one last week. This week we had 90 people attending. And if you want to see the recordings of both of those on YouTube, the links are on the latest RDRF website page there. So that was, I thought, very good presentations from Jeremy Leach and Claire Rogers in particular, and we spent a lot of time talking about how to get community involvement in reducing speeds and bringing in low traffic neighborhoods. Right, this is one for your files. Go to that link. Someone set up a petition to oppose low traffic neighborhoods, cycle lanes, and so on. So the DFT gave a response. It didn't have to go to Parliament because they didn't get enough signatures. And the DFT said the government is committed to delivering a step change in levels of active travel. We know the majority of people support giving more road space to cycling and walking in their local area. And here's their full response about the EATF, network management, duty guidance, low traffic neighborhoods, school streets. The effects on business are positive. Evidence shows that investment in cycling and walking is supported by the majority of people. Local authorities responsible for delivering cycling and walking schemes want an effective engagement with the local community. A lot of the schemes are trials with traffic regulation orders. Emergency services are consulted. And this is the official government response, supporting low traffic neighborhoods and cycle lanes and school streets and 20 mile an hour. Do go look at it there. That's from the official government department, the Department for Transport. So keep that link in your files. Right, we'll mention this in a bit. This is a article on the UK website, which was to a large extent repeated and posted in Peter Walker's article in The Guardian, saying that various leading transport experts, Phil Goodwin, Steve Melia, Gillian Annable, etc., are saying that you need to have the alternatives to motor traffic, and that should back up any kind of lobbying or campaigning about allocations for Emergency Active Travel Fund second tranche. I mentioned this article last week by Roger Harrabin, a quick 2-minute guide. This again, I'm mentioning the survey commissioned by Greenpeace, done by YouGov, talking about support for low traffic neighborhoods, etc. Important link. This is a program featuring someone called Ron Newman, recommended by Kate Carpenter. Do have a look at it, and other people liked it as well. Okay, a short article by David Davis of Pacts, very easy to read. Here's something prompted by the leader of the opposition knocking over a cyclist in his SUV when he was taking his suit to the cleaners a short distance away. That's him in the SUV, not the cyclist in the SUV. And talking about, you know, what are we going to do about SUVs in urban areas? This is something from Bill McKibben on climate change and the American elections. Do look at that. Another mention of the air quality report done by King's College. It's 4 years old now, but still worth it. The stats in it have been criticized for being much too high. It was mentioned today about a year ago, but it's still interesting. It's the 40,000 deaths a year from poor air quality, of which transport is a part, not the only part. And the figures may have been, may have been a bit large, but it still gives you a rough idea of the kind of numbers we should be talking about. Okay, that's your reading for this week. One other thing, this is someone put this up on Twitter, article in Evening Standard from September 1997. Some of us will remember John Prescott saying, "I will have failed if in 3 years I have not managed to reduce motor traffic. I want you to hold me to this." Some of us still are. The point there being that there's a kind of hypocrisy that people say, yeah, give up the car, but other people should do it. And I'm reminded of this because it's people saying, oh yeah, low traffic neighborhoods are great, but we should do something on the main roads first. And then you do something on the main roads, yeah, but you should do low traffic neighborhoods. And I've had this for years in road safety. Yeah, we should do something about some motorists, but not me. Other ones are the bad ones. And then when you do start to do something, even if it's this other group, oh, well, it's too inconvenient, I don't want to do it. So hypocrisy. Diversity page, yes, we have one person attending wearing a pussy hat. Okay, and that's about all that's new on the diversity page. We're still only getting about 30% women on Ideas with Beers. Right, the delay slide, yes. When are we going to get the 80% of the government's £225 million for walking and cycling? When is the £180 million going to come through? And it's the 9th time for Alex's tweet. And I want to talk a bit about this. Still haven't heard about get pedaling. That's something which we don't know about. I've heard about it, don't know what's happening. So someone suggested, how about a campaign on the hashtag where is EATF2? So I've asked around because we were told about 3 weeks ago that the Department by Little Birds, no names, no pack drill, that Department for Transport officials had worked out the allocation. It was just awaiting sign off from the top people in government, and it hasn't happened yet. So what should we do? After talking to various people, what I'm hearing is, first of all, this may have been delayed because of not getting the arrangement with Transport for London sorted out until this last week. And government has had to work out about reaching an arrangement with Transport for London, which they've now done, a 6-month arrangement I'll mention a bit later. Now that that arrangement has been fixed, government is now ready to formally announce the allocation of that £180 million to local authorities to do fundamental reallocation of road space according to local traffic note 120. Sorry, local transport note 120. And I did raise the idea of running a campaign, but the sort of general thing was, if you do have a Tory MP who's who's sort of sympathetic to low traffic neighbourhoods, get in touch with them and ask them to email or contact or ask a question in the House to Grant Shapps or Chris Heaton Harris. That was the kind of word I was getting, rather than a sort of more vigorous campaign from the usual suspects to get out there and start getting very annoyed and angry and doing whatever we might feel like being appropriate under second lockdown. So, you know, maybe we should have a chat about this. I'm now coming to the view that we should wait, yes, another week. Then I don't know. But in the meantime, if you have a Conservative MP in your constituency, do write to them saying, please, let's get the EATF second tranche funding properly, formally allocated, because a lot of people will want to cycle during lockdown. It's important to ride and to walk for your mental health, and we need support for it. Okay, stuff you can think is in last week. That's Chiltern, Manchester School Street. That's a nice thing. I thought I'd put it in again because it looks nice. Greater Manchester Walk Ride GM have responded to Greater Manchester saying, we've published our response which backs the vision but calls for faster, bolder changes with a clear action plan for them to be rolled out. Edinburgh, yeah, unfortunately a woman was killed cycling there last week. So the people behind the E for Edinburgh and Enough is Enough have put some blood on it because people were very upset about that. And Edinburgh hasn't been pushing enough. Bad news from Aberdeen. Last month, it created its first and only segregated cycle lane, 2 miles of traffic-free cycling along the River Don and seafront. 54 days later, it decided to rip it up. And that's bad. And here's a comment from Aberdeen Cycle Forum. So a bit of bad news there. London, yes, we've got the 6-month deal done with government. And we hope now this government will be able to get on with Emergency Active Travel Fund second tranche. Croydon, a nice little article there about what's happening with opposition to low traffic neighbourhoods, the Backlash, etc., the involvement of the Alliance of British Drivers, etc. Richmond Park, a nice newsletter from Richmond Park cyclists. You should have a look at that if you want to keep up to date with what people are being allowed to do in Richmond Park. Walthamstow, yes, 11 new filters have just gone in, creating a swathe of healthy streets and low traffic neighbourhoods in South Leighton and Leytonstone LTNs, and work on 2 new filters started for the Copper Mill Liverpool neighbourhood scheme, I think today or yesterday. That's Lambeth, Rosendale Road cycle lane. That looks nice for the little kids. Yeah, something from Jeremy Vine. He did a bit of a video being sort of close past, but he said, well, yeah, it wasn't too bad. And it showed that its life is much better down Kensington High Street. The ones have got a lot of reflective stuff on them and everybody likes it. And in fact, Will Norman says that cycling on Kensington High Street has more than doubled to over 3,000 per day. I don't know if that's compared to the same time last year or before the ones went in. He didn't actually give the figures, but that's what is being claimed. Brent, here's a little graphic from the people campaigning for the Olive Road low traffic neighbourhood. It's been done pretty badly in Brent. It took a lot of time to do it. They're putting them up in not very good places. Almost looks like they're being sort of built to fail. Maybe that's another thing that's been mentioned about how to campaign about EATF2, that we should get in there with the engagement and consultation, you know, not formal consultation necessarily, but the engagement do it properly, get it done well, have nicely thought out schemes, and that's where our efforts should be doing, rather than just putting in something which is going to not work, have to be taken out, and give the whole idea a bad name. Kingston, yes. I think this is on a route which is supposed to be quite good, but these have gone in at the end very suddenly, and apparently they were put in because of this same old thing which I've been hearing for 20 years, complaints about one or two mopeds or motorcycles being ridden on the route, so you have to put up these things. And in fact, actually, you can get a cargo bike through them apparently, and a disabled person's bicycle. So you'll be able to ride a motorbike through them. I mean, you know, what is the point? And it looks bloody dreadful, you know, it's just stupid. And also in Kingston, the cycling campaign is saying, are the temporary cycle lanes going back on the bridge in next week ready for lockdown too? Because there were some put on Kingston Bridge that I talked about on here in, I think, in April or May, certainly. And they were taken out. Let's hope they can go back in. Right, that's your basic updates. There's your campaigns and reading, new stuff. Yeah, some good news stuff here. There's the recordings of our webinar, company car scam, the important work. There's consultation being done by Active Travel Academy on their report, which you can see there. Still some stuff on Adam Alton on deaths from COVID-19 and comparing those with deaths from poor air quality. Some of the car freaks were getting annoyed about that in the letters page of Local Transport Today. There's the big thing from Transport Planning Society, your thread on how to respond to complaints from the Islington councillor. Do sign the hit and run petition. I don't know if Planning for the Future is still open. Pavement parking, I think, is still open. Highway code is gone. That's it. So just finish off on some adverts. This was one, I think, done by Michael Colville-Anderson many years ago. And there's one from, I forget the name of the guy who does lovely cartoons for the Cycling UK people. And this went up in Bristol, and it's very nice. So I welcome your views on what you think about the EATF Tranche 2. And that's it.
And I'm going to speak for, I suppose, about 10 minutes, and then I'd really value a discussion about next steps. And obviously with everyone, we'll share the anxiety about whatever tonight the vote or the legal wranglings after it in the US will bring, but let's hope we don't go into kind of deeper Handmaid's Tale scenarios on from that. And yeah, you know, this is a kind of meeting I kind of wonder why I haven't been part of for a while. 70 odd people, slightly intimidating because I'm sure all of you know a lot more about local transport than me, all really active, and lots of old friends who I've known for many years, since the 90s or 2000s, etc. So yeah, really pleased to be here today, and hopefully join further ones going forward. But what I was going to talk today about was clean air, and just give a bit of a picture about where I think we are on clean air. What are some of the challenges and opportunities going forward? And just as a bit of a background, so I'm Jason Torrance. I work for UK 100, which is a network of ambitious local leaders who are committed to ambitious, in quotes, action on climate change, probably not as ambitious as I or everyone on this call would like, but ambitious in the current political setup. I've been active or involved in one form or another for, just showing my age here, almost 30 years or so. So lots has changed, and sadly lots has remained the same or got worse over those years. But here we are, and I think we're at a time, of course, of great opportunity. I'm a relentless optimist, gets me out of bed in the morning. But I just wanted to talk briefly about air quality and kind of make three points really, or in three areas. One around COVID and where we are with that. Secondly, about the rise of localism. And then thirdly, about clean air zones and the opportunity that I think clean air zones provide us, and the challenges around that. So I'll talk for about 10 minutes and then be really keen to have a discussion going forward. So I suppose what we find at UK 100, and I'm the policy director there, so spend a lot of my time talking with local authority officers, government officials, and elected members, leaders, or cabinet members or councillors. It is, of course, we know local authorities are in a pretty bad state at the moment, as central government are, and businesses are at the moment. So I think there are opportunities from COVID, but I'd say not as we know it at the moment. And I'm sure I'm not the only one trying to get my head around what any kind of new normal might be like. But we certainly ain't going back to business as usual anytime soon. And I think some things to kind of illustrate this. We have a UK national debt at the moment, which has gone beyond £2 trillion. That's more than the value of the entire UK economy. And that's about 2/5 of what it was during the height of the Second World War. So apparently, we've never had a national debt like this since the 60s, but obviously not as much yet as it was during the Second World War. And that, of course, in terms of our economic system that we live under at the moment, has big impacts. I'd say it particularly has a big impact on local authorities, many of which have to deliver statutory duties like adult social care, child support services, etc. About 8 out of 10 local councils apparently at the moment are at risk of bankruptcy. And that's for many local leaders, local authorities, that's a real threat for them at the moment. And I think also, we all must be aware, of course, that the space that local leaders have for thinking ambitiously about things beyond the kind of what they see as must have immediate action, delivering adult social care, making sure that there's child support services, etc., it is extremely limited. It's not too long ago that many local authority staff were being seconded into other parts of their department to set up local morgues or things like that. So I think that's the reality where we are at the moment. But of course, despite that, and I'm sure many people on this call have been a part of this, there's some amazing things happening. There's lots of road space allocation happening. Our roads generally, with the slide, our roads generally are quieter with the slide that you shared earlier, Bob, in mind. Traffic levels are rising, but certainly they're quieter than they were across the country pre-pandemic. So I think that provides us with some real opportunity. But I think one of the things that we must all focus on as we go forwards, as well as continuing all the fantastic work we're doing to push the local solutions, walking, cycling, public transport, alternatives to car travel, the move towards electric cars, etc. I think going forwards, there are some very tough choices for central and local government to make that we should push them towards. And I think it's as much about what government shouldn't be investing in as what they should be investing in. And the National Roads Programme, of course, £27 billion of investment, still planned, still nominally allocated, but could be cancelled. I think should be a real focus of all of us. If that money were, or a proportion of that money, once it's resized for COVID debt, be put into sustainable travel rather than roads. So I think that's a real opportunity going forward. I think secondly, we of course see a real rise in localism, and I think this is for me, as someone that's been active trying to push forward and support change for 30 or so years, it is tough because on the one hand, we want action, and we need action really fast, and some centralized action is one of the quickest ways to get that. But also we know that local people, local politicians, or most of the time anyway, know how to get stuff done appropriately on the ground. So I think there's a real kind of tension there. But I think supporting local people, businesses, and of course local authorities to kind of have ambition and find their own way is absolutely critical. And I think one of the things that in terms of climate, you know, in my view, the biggest issue of our age, what is missing is we have some kind of roadmap or a route map, cycle route for action on climate nationally. We have nothing locally. There's lots of local authorities, about 2/3 of local authorities in England that have declared a climate emergency. I'd say probably about 10% of those are actually taking meaningful action and are thinking about and planning activity. Lots of them have been pushed into making this declaration, or have made it because they see which way the wind is blowing or whatever, but there's no national framework that supports, mandates, requires, enables local action. So I think something akin to the legislation around a national climate act is needed kind of locally. And I think we should all be supporting, encouraging, enabling, demanding that local authorities move forward quickly on that. And I think lastly, on clean air zones, I think this is a huge opportunity for us all. And when I say for us all, I mean everyone concerned with trying to get progressive change on travel choice, environmental protection, and a world where the car doesn't dominate society. I think simply clean air zones, or particularly charging clean air zones, are the key that could unlock larger change. but it's not, of course, like everything, it's not simple. You know, thinking back to 2008, we had the Transport Innovation Fund. You know, that was about almost 10 billion, about £9.5 billion of funding over 7 years. And we saw some local authorities, including Greater Manchester, step forward with a plan to spend it, went to referendum. Virtually zero support from central government, and those of us that were involved at the time sadly saw the results of the referendum massively turning against the idea of a congestion charge in Greater Manchester, and slowly the whole idea of a national road pricing scheme fell apart. So I think that undoubtedly has cast a big shadow over the opportunity to move forward with progressive measures that penalise the car and enable walking, cycling, public transport, or the option not to travel. So I think where we are now is we have a new thing that has arisen over the last 4 years or so around air quality. It's obviously been around for some time, but I think undoubtedly the public attitude around air quality, COVID aside, of course, it is really strong. You know, we saw the consultations on proposed clean air zones in towns and cities around the country. Local authorities told us that those were the consultations that were engaged with at the greatest level. They had the greatest level of engagement of any consultation that the local authority had done. So obviously not all of those people were positive, but lots of them were. And I think certainly last year and the year before, it was in the context of the school climate strikes and Extinction Rebellion and some fantastic local campaigning. So I think going forward, we see a number of local authorities that are continuing with clean air zones. We've got 5 set to launch in 2021. Those have been postponed from earlier this year. That's Bath, Birmingham, Newcastle, Sheffield and York. And we see 4 being considered for in consultations: Bristol, Cambridge, Liverpool and Greater Manchester. And of course we have a separate process and commitment to clean air or congestion charging in London, and separate plans in Oxford and a few other places. So I think there's the opportunity going forward there for the beginnings of moves to enable and fund and walking and cycling, restrict car travel, etc. But it won't happen without support. And I think we've seen, and I'm sure you've encountered locally and perhaps discussed several times in this group, some of the pushback that is happening from what I like to call the forces of darkness, coming against school streets, low traffic neighbourhoods or clean air zones. These things must be resisted, and I think we should be organising around that. We must look to amplify local voices, local businesses, and support local authorities in this, because putting forward something like a clean air zone takes a lot of, we might not think it seems quite the obvious thing to do, but I think amongst the many choices local authorities have, it takes a lot of political bravery to do something like a clean air zone. And without our support and our efforts to mobilise others to speak up in favour, I think that small step towards the wider changes that we all need just won't be made. So I think things like school streets, low traffic neighbourhoods must be in a much more ambitious, wider framework, like a citywide clean air zone, moving towards, I would hope, over time, some kind of road charging, congestion charge or whatever zone, but one step at a time. So I think that's a priority for us. So yeah, just in summary, I think we must focus on roads program. It's as much about what government doesn't invest in as much as what they do invest in. I think local authorities need a framework to support them around understanding and taking ambitious action on climate. Oh. And then thirdly, I think we've all got to get behind supporting ambitious action where it exists, or the beginnings of where it exists, on clean air, school streets, LTNs, and see it as part of a broader approach. So that's my pitch to you all. Really keen to have a bit of a discussion, and hopefully either on this call or shortly after, cook up further mischief.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Jason. That was great. Definitely. I'm just going to say a few rules for the chat. If you want to put your name in the chat, that I'll know that you want to ask a question. So I imagine there'll be quite a few questions in there. And I just want to comment that I kind of agree with you that air quality is the big hook. I mean, for years, I kind of thought it was helping. Dave, you're going to have to mute yourself, Dave. You're in a feedback dub loop for us again, and I'll just finish this this sentence. Yeah, what was I saying? So yeah, for years I thought like the healthy streets was one, get people active, but the air quality really resonates with people, I think, because whether you're fit or not, whether you're active or not, it's getting you. Everybody can kind of associate with that, particularly at the moment. So I'm just going to open it up for questions. Simon, I can see that you've come in first. Do you want to ask a question? And
well, I was just going to say, air quality, there is a bit of a double-edged sword to it, which is certainly in London. We've seen quite a few of the kind of air quality campaigners who've come in have been very against low traffic neighbourhoods, for instance, because they view that any traffic displacement onto main roads is fundamentally a problem. So I think air quality, while it is a real, like it's an issue, that a lightning rod issue that lots of people feel strongly about, it isn't an issue that universally unites people around progressive action. And that's something we've got to kind of think about and work on.
So just coming back on that, because I think that's a really, really good point. You know, we are saddled still a bit with the kind of relics of government being pushed into action on this by Client Earth with their legal action, and they've gone for the lowest common denominator, of course, which is main roadside emissions. And this isn't clearly the only place or the extent of what we should be looking at, but yeah, I kind of struggle with thinking what a broader approach is, but surely we need a broader approach, a citywide or a nationwide approach to air quality that doesn't just look in the short term at air quality around main roads. But the only pushback I'd say against that is, you know, in my experience, trying to get action from central and local government happening over the last 30 years, you know, it's bloody difficult, and at least that approach has started something. But I agree, you know, it's not without its problems.
Oh, brilliant, thanks for that. Steve, did you want to come in with a question?
Yeah, sure. I've got a question for Jason. Hi, Jason. You all right? It was around the fact that on these calls, which we've been solidly going through all of lockdown with, we've talked quite a bit about local action versus some sort of national coordination, and whether we need to start joining up everybody's efforts to have, well, it's a horrible phrase in political campaigning, but a ground war and an air war simultaneously coordinated so we can actually achieve some progress, which is macho and horrible language, and I'm sorry to everybody for using it. But if you had a sort of magic wand where you could sort of convene the perfect campaign to really energize this space, both nationally and locally, what would your dream sort of coordinated coalition look like?
Well, I'm sure Roger, who's on the call, Roger Geffin, would agree or smile when I say the predictable here is I think we're in this crazy situation where we've got this ongoing kind of love affair with the car. We've got this ongoing investment in big infrastructure, and we've got the crown jewels, as the government like to see it, of a national road building program. We've got to end that national road building program to, I think, sorry to use a horrible marketing phrase, I'm sure you're sick of hearing them, Steve, but to shift the dial a bit on where focus and investment goes for local authorities, businesses, etc., and free up some resource. I think a focus on moving away from or reallocating that money from a national roads program to a, you know, whatever, for a sustainable travel program or a climate program or whatever. I think that is the obvious thing for me to go for. You know, and in my experience over the years or the decades is when you have a large pot of money and a large, much repeated mantra from central government, that trickles down. That has a big impact and undermines all the kind of local investments that people might want to make in sustainable travel, etc. So that's my big pitch.
It's a good one. Sally, did you want to come in?
Hi, yeah, thank you. That was really interesting presentation, Jason. I wondered whether, and it touches a little bit on what Simon was saying as well, that issue of air pollution and you know, depending on where you're measuring and what you're measuring, you can feel like you're making it worse and persuading people that you shouldn't do something in a particular place. I mean, in Newcastle, we have a lot of monitoring, and the university are actively involved in that as well. And I wondered whether there was a difference that if you're talking to lots of different authorities, does it vary their attitude in terms of how they feel about air pollution and its impact and their understanding of it? Does it depend on how much they're monitoring and how much they're engaging perhaps with academic partners, or, you know, or what their campaign groups are like?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a couple of levels to this, I suppose. One, you know, in local authorities, you know, they're staffed by humans, even though it might not seem like that all of the time, and they have their different kind of emotions about these things. So some of them feel the air quality or the air pollution issue, and some of them don't. You know, I think that, so there's a personal issue to it, and I think most of us have someone in our lives, in our family, in our friendship circle, that is impacted by air quality, bad air quality, and I think that has an impact on a personal level, and I think that obviously bleeds through to what people do in professionally. I think we have no national consistent framework for monitoring, and so we see some places, I think like Birmingham, for instance, that have a very good monitoring system. They might not be doing all the best things with the data, but they have a good network, and lots of other places don't have a consistent or a big monitoring outfit to pull data from. So yeah, that absolutely has a big impact. And I suppose just lastly, going back to my kind of earlier point around, in terms of the existing action on air quality, we wouldn't be starting from where we are now. We have what the government call a clean air zone framework, purely based around responding to legal action brought forward by Client Earth around roadside emissions, etc., which is a way away, miles away from a whole kind of region approach to getting towards World Health Organization air pollution standards, or trying to, as much as possible, bearing in mind you'll never totally eliminate it, but as much as possible eliminating air pollution from our air. So I think there are constraints, but again, I think it comes back to a kind of national network, a national framework that's really missing, that it enables kind of local variations and supports it. Does that answer your question, Sally?
He looks happy. Let's bring in some more tough questions. Andy, did you have a question? Oh, all gone. Very nice.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it was actually two things. I was just following on from Sally. I did put on the chat. I looked at the urban observatory stuff in Newcastle, and it was brilliant. But I've been trying to raise with my local authority. So I'm actually a councillor in BCP in Bournemouth and Poole, and the sort of the averaging in the sort of the sampling that's done generally is hopeless. And it doesn't look at the peak times, doesn't look at the really busy bits. It just looks at the ways in which they can cite well, my suspicion is they look at where they can cite things so that they don't actually show high readings, which is not great. Not least because they didn't like when Greenpeace tried to do similar readings to a good standard, they ignored those readings. But the issue, I suppose, was just one I was going to raise around the National Transport Board. So you talked about the road building programme, and I sat on the Western Gateway for a short while. And everyone around the table, all the local authorities were saying, yeah, rail, we want to invest in, if you're going to invest in big projects, we want to invest in rail. And it was all about, it's got to be shovel ready. That's 5 years out before you can start. And so it is about this huge inertia and what we can do both to overcome the inertia, but also to bring in strategically spending on cycling. Because I was saying, if you're going to build a bridge, you should build decent quality cycle provision across it, even if it's a main A road. It's a big barrier, and therefore you've got the diggers there. So what can we do to actually get walking and cycling sort of higher on that agenda at that strategic level, to actually, and maybe it's the sub-national transport bodies are the ones that are getting some of the devolved monies still to spend mostly on roads.
Yeah. Well, I think while I can't help thinking, while we've got this national road building programme, that's where most of the focus is going to go. I suppose once you kind of look at the all of the kind of cost benefit analysis and the Treasury Green Book, the national planning framework, etc. There's so much to bloody change that it's all a bit insurmountable. But I can't help thinking that a first step has to be cancelling the National Roads Programme to free up kind of money that will need a home in terms of infrastructure, and other systems will need to come into play to soak it up. But you're absolutely right, kind of in an investment in local walking, cycling, public transport should be the priority, but it's a poor, in terms of travel, I'd say it's a poor third or fourth, if that, at the moment, isn't it?
Good man. Roxanne, did you want to come in?
Great, thanks. Hi, Jason. It's been a while. Hope you're well.
Hello, Roxanne. Nice to see you.
Thanks for the t-shirt, Brian. I have to admit, I haven't been able to listen as intently as I would like. I'm multitasking, but I think that what comes to mind with all of this is exactly where do we need to pitch our efforts? Are we aiming for public hearts and minds? And how can we do that? Or is this very specifically targeting government or local authorities? And I think that the example from Adam Tranter with Bike is Best is just starting to show how we can get numerous organizations working together with one message. But I think we can go bigger. And I've said this in so many of these meetings, but we need to get health organizations, environmental organizations, and transport organizations all together. And I think there is a really big public campaign that will pressure the government while we're all working behind the scenes on the policy. But I think there is scope for us to get together, get a grant, get a specific member of staff or team who can do that coordinating. And I think having someone that maybe doesn't sit in any one of our organizations is quite key, because I think that's what I find with the collaboration that I've seen is we just can't agree on the messaging. We need to get a real expert from almost outside of our bubbles to come in and get that amazing comms message put together out into the world and get all of our campaigning lined up. But I mean, I don't know how you feel but I think we're missing the hearts and minds here, and getting individuals out there who haven't thought about this before to start saying the right things to politicians.
Yeah. I guess there's something like an Active Travel Alliance or something like that, which kind of exists, I suppose, to a certain extent, doesn't it? With some of the big walking, cycling organisations, charities, but having it broader. I think, I spent 8 years working for Sustrans. And now kind of on the other side of that, now working with local authorities on climate and supporting them on climate, etc. I kind of feel you're right in a way, Roxanne, that the opportunity or the need to think bigger is really there, and the absence of that is really missing. But I think the bigger issue, I think, is something like air quality or climate, and I think it's about contextualizing kind of alternatives to car travel, within that. But I do for me always come back to the opportunity with air quality. We all know, most of us know someone in our lives who are impacted by poor air quality. There's a real immediate kind of issue with it in terms of people have kind of bronchitis or asthma or whatever, and in some places we can actually see the smog. So for me, I think it's a real kind of gateway kind of issue. But I think for me, it's about having that big framework first, clean air zones, that requires things like walking and cycling to be prioritised, etc. So yeah, I think big campaign would be great. I think just the issue of focus and keeping it simple. I'm sure we've all been involved in things with like, what do we want? We want these 60 things. When do we want them? Tomorrow? No, you're not going to get 60 things. It's about having 1, 2, or I'd say three things. Yeah.
I think the thing that we sometimes get stuck on, and it's all of us in this group, is we often get too technical too quickly, and we often start with what people have to give up rather than what they have to gain. And even talking about clean air zones, people hear that and go, I can't drive. And we're not selling them the vision of, imagine if you could breathe better. So I think we know technically what's needed, but I think as a industry, our strengths are not always in how we sell that. But anyway, that's just, I'm keen to see where this goes, but seeing Greenpeace starting to get involved in this space, I think we will see health organizations getting involved. the collaboration potential there to have much more impact. I think we almost need to go and find campaigns for any cause that we think have been really effective and use that as inspiration to help sort of structure what we can do.
Yeah.
All right. I think what I'll do, because we've got one more speaker, but like there's a couple of people that really want to ask a question, so I'm going to ask Jason to do kind of 1-sentence replies, just to see how he copes with that. Yeah, I've got to ask Dave Halliday's question, and which was like, okay, UK 100. What about the other nations? How well do you communicate with Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales? That was Dave's one. Say that in a sentence, please, Jason.
Okay. So I think we're going to be getting better at that towards COP, obviously in Glasgow, but predominantly we're England. That's where the vast majority of local authorities are. But we work with the willing. So the 100 local authorities are the leaders. We can sometimes try and take horses to water, but not make them drink. We work with the willing.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And Roger Geffin, I can't leave Roger hanging, so I've got to bring him in for a question as well. Then we'll move on to Sally. Roger, you still there?
You're muted. Oh, yeah.
No, I was just trying to unmute. Yes. Sorry, I haven't got a question. I was just going to add a comment, if I may, and I'll try and keep it quick in response to the conversation between Roxanne and Jason just now, which I thought was really good and absolutely spot on. You know, we've got to a really interesting moment right now, and I was thinking about this literally in the last couple of days, where we've made real progress on the funding, nowhere near enough, but you know, it's 15 years ago, and in my memory that we were kind of trying to persuade the government to give us 5 million for an annual budget for Cycling England, and now we've got an annual average of 400 million, i.e. 2 billion over 5 years, and we're still saying it's not enough. So that's progress. We've still got a long way to go. We've got the fund. We've made progress on the funding. We've got really good design standards. We've got the highway code review going. So that's a whole load of progress on issues that we've campaigned, that some of us, including Jason, have campaigned on for years. And now what? And I think you're absolutely right. There is actually a bigger picture that goes beyond cycling and walking now. We've got to start thinking about wider alliances. Environment groups, you're absolutely right, Roxanne. Health groups, you're absolutely right. I'd add businesses. And we've got to get some Tory backbenchers, both councillors as well as MPs, on our side in order to overcome Grant Shapps' reticence, because this really is about Grant Shapps' reticence to really kind of drive this agenda forward. You know, Gear Change says all the right things, and then we get a letter come from Grant Shapps that sort of undermines local authorities' confidence. And that's because there is still a perception, despite everything that Gear Change says about mainstreaming walking and cycling, not regarding it as peripheral, there is still this perception that it's just this thing you do at the edge of the road, kind of, you know, that rather than a fundamental change in how our streets and communities operate. And to get that message through, we're going to need more allies than just us. That's kind of my latest thinking about what next.
Yeah, no, nailed it there, Roger. I'll just say, I often say that whenever I have conversations with these big guys, it's like they give us the money if they felt we could spend it, but it's such a nightmare getting money spent on cycling in particular. I think walking we might have more of a chance on. But at that stage, I think it's a really good segue for what Sally's hopefully going to talk to us about. Sally, are you there? The floor is yours.
Yeah, so I came and talked right at the beginning when Brian first started one of the early sessions about kind of messaging and thinking about who our audience is. And then a lot has happened since then. And I thought it might be helpful just to share some of the campaign, one campaign particularly that we've run locally, in the hope that it might be helpful for other people, but also I think because it's made me really reflect on the campaigning that we've been doing, and thinking about sort of how we go forward. So I am going to I have got a presentation. Can I share it? Am I? Yeah. Right, can you see that?
Yeah, you're all good. You have to make a full screen this time. I'll remember to ask you.
Yeah, that's it. I'm on slideshow. There we go. Right. So, can you see that? Is that still on slideshow?
Oh, it was, and then it went off.
Hang on. Right. So, there's two headlines that have caught my eye in the last don't know, week or so, which have really made me think about what we've been doing here in Newcastle. And the first one was this Guardian article: despite a loud opposing minority, low traffic neighbourhoods are increasingly popular. And it's really encouraging. And it says that, you know, that there are a lot of people there who really, really support low traffic neighbourhoods. Some of these people might just support them in theory, but by the by, there is some support for them. And then a couple of days later, there was another article which says culture wars are fought by a tiny minority. And when you're involved in campaigning, you are in that tiny minority. And often the other people that you're coming into contact with most often, particularly on social media, are the people who are in the other tiny minority, the people who are really opposed to what's happening. And it can be very difficult not to just end up engaging with those people directly. So I think it's always good to remind ourselves that when something like a low traffic neighbourhood is announced, there's a bunch of people who are yellow. Everybody can be smiley, by the way. There's a bunch of people who are yellow, who are, yes, this is brilliant. We need to tell everyone how brilliant this is. And then there are a bunch of people who are red, who just think this is the end of the world. We have to stop this now. But most people are somewhere in the middle. Some of them go, this might work, but you know, well, let's see. And some of them think, I'm not really sure about this, and it could be really awful, but I'm willing to wait and see. And I think when we are campaigning, it's very difficult, it's very easy to forget about the people in the middle because they're not usually making a lot of noise. And it's also quite hard often to get them to make noise and to kind of come over to our side. So the campaign that I'm going to talk about is around a bridge closure in Newcastle. Newcastle's COVID measures included both temporary cycle lanes, not huge lengths of cycle lane, but some couple of cycle lanes in the city centre, which are really important. And if they get made permanent, which hopefully they will be good links. But they also closed 5 local bridges across the city to, well, running traffic, as it was announced in the Evening Chronicle at the beginning of July. And 3 of these bridges mean that there are now 3 small low traffic neighbourhoods in the city, because that was the only point that needed to be closed to make these areas into low traffic neighbourhoods. One of the bridges had been closed previously as mitigation measures as a result of some roadworks. And that was considered to be the controversial one, because it had already been really controversial. So when this was announced, it's this bridge, Salters Bridge, which is sort of flagged up as being the one that they think people are going to be interested in. But and then, of course, actually, it isn't, because that people were already engaged in the discussion about whether that bridge should stay open or closed. And actually, it's turned out to be less controversial. The controversial bridge was another bridge nearby which is Stonyhurst Road Bridge, and it happens to be very close to where I live. And so for that reason, I've been much more engaged in it as a campaign than I might ordinarily be, because I chaired the Newcastle cycling campaign. So we take a kind of overview of what's going on across the city. We don't tend to get as involved in very, very tiny local campaigns, but we'll help support other people to do so. And so we also have the Backlash in Newcastle. There is a Facebook page called Gosforth Traffic, and that is basically where all Backlash starts and kind of expands from. And so as soon as this was announced, Gosforth Traffic went completely crazy, and as a result of that, a number of people who live very close to the bridge found each other and started a campaign to reopen this bridge before it even closed. And there were 2 campaigns for a while: A Bridge Too Far and Room for Us All. So, and then of course, not long after that, somebody else started a petition. And in the meantime, there were a group of us who had got together sort of to say, oh, you must email your local councillors. But as the kind of pressure ramped up with this petition starting, we thought we're going to have to do something a bit more than this if we're going to kind of keep local councillor support and decision maker support. So we started a local group, and it was word of mouth to start with. We have a WhatsApp group, And I think when these things happen, I think those early kind of days or weeks are really, really important, because that sort of sets the tone of how do local people feel about this. So really within, and it's always the beginning of August that the council seems to want to launch things like this, and everybody's on holiday, so we're all in the Lake District sort of frantically texting each other. But within a few days, we'd got a group together and we'd got as many people as we could to write to councillors and support. We'd started a little Twitter feed, and also in response to the petition, we didn't want to start a petition. I don't think getting into petition wars is always, I mean, they can be useful, but it's not generally that useful. But an open letter can be a really nice way of showing that there is a lot of local support. And so we had a short statement which said, we support the trial closure of this bridge because it is a trial and we want to see what happens. And that allowed all those people who weren't really that sure about it to sign up to the trial. And we, again, that went around within a week. We had, I think, 100 signatures. It's not an area where, you know, there's a sort of high density on one side and quite low density on the other. So, but we, you know, with street names, and so the councillors, they could see that there was support, and they didn't need to see that everybody supported it, but to see that there's some support and that those people are real people who live in these streets, I think is really, really helpful if you're kind of making decisions about an area. We also produced a leaflet which we put through every single door in a kind of sort of the nearness of the part that is the low traffic neighbourhood and all of the streets that are directly on the opposite side of this bridge. And that sort of had a few myth busting facts, but it was mainly also to say to people, we think this trial should go ahead. And we got some press. And so my first point that I think that this is how I feel about having been part of this campaign, and what we really tried to do is that our audience was our decision maker or decision makers, but that other people are listening. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to make the person who's making the decision about this bridge staying open or closed feel that they have some support. They have some support in the local area, and they have some support from people who can give them, sort of tell them why it's so important to them. And of course, the backlash ramped up massively as soon as we started our positive campaign. There were some really angry people. They were, again, their Facebook, what this kind of Retake Stonyhurst Road Bridge was posted on their Facebook page. And we felt that we had to respond to this without engaging in their arguments. There was a lot of talk about how elderly people were going to be housebound. Disabled people weren't going to be able to have carers come in, you know, the works. We haven't, I don't think, necessarily directly addressed those comments, other than to say, yes, it's not going to be wonderful for everybody. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's not going to be wonderful for everybody, but that doesn't mean that it is the worst thing to do. It still might be the best thing to do. Because there's a lot of people out there who are perfectly reasonable people who can see that actually it is going to make some people's lives a little bit more difficult. And it's okay to say, well, yeah, but we still think it is the right thing to do because it has all of these benefits. And one of the things, this is our leaflet, you're not going to read it all, but we started our leaflet by saying that we know there's been a lot of debate about the proposal and that it's happened really quickly. And we understand people's fears about it. And we felt it was really important that we acknowledged that those fears were there. On social media, we haven't done masses of social media, but we've been trying as much as possible to share people's own kind of testimonies. So people on our WhatsApp group or others who emailed us would give us their own experiences, which we can relay. And again, this isn't about persuading everybody who lives in our local area. This is to show our decision maker, who is Arlene Ainsley, who appears at the bottom in this slide, who is the cabinet member for transport and air quality, and to show her that lots of local people are really thankful for what she's done. And she herself, I think, was very grateful for that, because she was getting a lot of abuse and some really unpleasant, I mean, in fact, I think at one point she did have to call the police. She was getting some really unpleasant stuff. And another thing that we did was many of us actually wrote to her personally to offer our support, not in relation to the bridge, but in relation to the fact that she was getting all of this abuse. So we didn't really engage with the arguments and always try and address the arguments. I mean, sometimes people will describe things which aren't true, and they will come up with all sorts of things about things that are happening. And you can just, you can say, well, that's not my experience, or I haven't seen this, or is there data to support this? And then you just got to leave it, really, because people are not interested. You're turning a lot of people off by engaging too much with those fights. So I would say our next lesson was try not to pick unnecessary fights with the opposition. People are entitled to protest, entitled to have their lived experience respected. And you'll be judged as much as they are, I think, by people who are watching and listening. So, and so one of the reasons that I didn't want to advertise that I was doing this talk is that when something like this happens very close to where you live, and I know there are other people on this call who have also experienced this, it gets very personal, and you do know some of these people personally. So the daughter of one of my neighbours that I'm pictured with in the photograph on the bottom right here, when the local press came to talk to people about the bridge closure, she is the person who started the petition, and I know her, and I know why she's upset about it. And we had a conversation about how, it wasn't a good way to go about doing things, the kind of the name calling and the kind of and lots of really anti-cycling stuff. And we were asked to have our photograph taken on either side of a cone, and we both said, no, we'll stand together, because we can have different views and we can disagree and we can fight our campaigns, but I think it shouldn't come in between people personally. And I think what it really drove home to me is that the people that you're dealing with, whatever you think about them, are other people. And I think when you know those people, then it makes it harder to treat them in a way that you might not ordinarily treat people. And so I think that's a kind of lesson for me, for everybody, probably. And that's my final point. I mean, I haven't really told you how much fun we have. We have had some fun doing the campaign, and we obviously got to know loads of people in the area that we didn't know before. But I do think that kind of be inclusive, understand that, yes, this is going to be amazing for one of my neighbours whose mother is in a wheelchair because she has motor neuron disease, and now, it's amazing for her that they can kind of get on the streets and off they go. But it's going to be less good for somebody else that I know who has to use a car and has a disabled child. It is going to be more difficult for them. And I think that, so the final thing is, I think, be nice. And I'll just leave you with a photograph of our lovely bridge.
Yeah, that was absolutely brilliant, Sally, as always. And it's almost like doesn't really need any questions, just soak up and soak in what Sally said and do that. That's what I always try to do. Has anybody got like a particular question, though? We are running out of time, and I want to introduce a new last words section. But has anybody got a question for Sally, or we all just soaking it in? That's all good. Nice. I thought that was brilliant, Sally. And it's a really good part 2 to your early one as well, after you've been through the mangle with it all. So fantastic. I will just bring Simon Monk in to do a kind of last word thing, because he was making some really good points in the chat that I wanted to get on for the YouTube listeners or watchers. Yeah, you watch on YouTube, don't you? Of course you do. Simon, did you want to say anything?
Go on. Yeah, no, just as I said in the chat, really, I think I keep coming back to pollution as being this thing that you try and this is jumping back to Dave Torrance's work, I guess, is just that pollution is this thing that you kind of, or the government and campaigners and everyone tries to get down to just within legal limits. So there is this kind of, what's the least we can do to get under the bar, as it were. And that's, again, a thing that worries me about all this is, you know, you see Bristol saying essentially to people, you know, if 10% fewer people drive, then we can all just scrap the CAZ and forget about it. It was, you know, like we can all just keep driving because we're under the limit, you know, we've done it, we've done job, you know, mission accomplished or whatever. And I just think that health and kids and climate, which are areas that LCC has really looked at, you know, strongly, and we're, you know, they force your hand, as it were, to do bolder things, because really, what level of car use is there that is great for kids? What level of car use is there that's great for our health? What level of car use is there that's great for climate, etc.? And I think, you know, if we are going to focus on pollution, and that's not me saying don't do anything on pollution or whatever, but if we're going to do stuff on pollution, I think we need to be much clearer that there is no, you know, there is no particulate level that's safe. There is no safe level of pollution. And I think we need to be much clearer on that, because at the moment, the rhetoric around pollution is essentially electric cars and it'll all be okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great last point. So I'm happy into it. I might do that in future, but see someone do a really good point in the chat. I'm going to make you say it to finish off. But like, I'll end just by thanking Jason. Thought you were fantastic. Thanks for coming along. And Sally, always brilliant. And I just listen to what you say and do it entirely. I think that's what a lot of people should do. So yeah, we're 1 minute over time, so we'll call it a day there, and I'll see you all next week, hopefully. All right, nice one, everybody.
Thanks everyone.